Hey, welcome to episode 105. Yes, I do know how to count. Last week I said 103 when it was 104. Oy, but you'll be fine. Anyway, welcome to Scar Bears. I'm Chris D.T. Gordon. It is fantastic to have you here with me today, and helping me out as always are Nate and Britton Barron. Please give them some love at Nate Barron if you want them to help you on your projects. Well, I tell you, this spring thing, I love spring, but you know what? We still have those dark struggles. Even though the sun is out in the sky more and more, we still have those situations that can make our days dark. And if greater gratitude, positivity, and resilience can help you in your life journey, please check me out at chrisdtgordon.com. Let's start a conversation how we can help you get through those dark days, overcome your obstacles, and strengthen your gratitude, positivity, and resilience. Well, today I'm joined by my new friend, Kelly Butler. Kelly, how are you doing today?
I am doing so well, and I am a little bit grateful that I'm in Roswell, Georgia, and not in Minnesota, because I'm just not made of that stern stuff for this cold as we're recording right now in late January.
Yes, it is a bit nippy out, I would say. And a couple of days ago, as of this recording, it was negative 25. So I think you as a Georgian may not have appreciated the cold as those of us up here who actually some people actually enjoy it. I'm not
Go
one of them.
figure.
Yeah, I know, right? Hey, whatever makes you happy,
That's right.
So anyway, Kelly and I are of an interesting group in that when we reached 40, we decided, the whole midlife crisis thing is so overplayed. Some people go get sports cars, some people go on great trips, some people make new friends, no judgment there. We decided we're going to do something else entirely. We're going to spice it up. We're going to almost die. And so that's what we did, but we did it two totally different ways. And my audience knows my story, Kelly, but they don't know yours. So if you could please share, that would be great.
Absolutely. And I'm so delighted to be here with some incredible warriors listening in. And I imagined and planned my 40th birthday that I would actually be in Italy with my two teenage sons and my husband, taking my family out of the country for the first time. And where I actually was on my 40th birthday was in a wheelchair at the Shepherd Center, which is a neurological institute in Atlanta, and wasn't quite as fun as I planned.
Atlanta and Italy, they can be warm. So there is a similarity there, but I can see how a wheelchair may not be as scenic as walking the Coliseum or climbing to a CC.
You're so right. Exactly. And so, I was really an overall pretty healthy mom of two boys and, working in a corporate career, and I got sick with a virus, and it was right around the time COVID was just starting to really come into its own here in the US. And instead of recovering normally from that virus, my body thought it was still fighting that virus, but in actuality, it was fighting itself, and specifically the nerve coatings throughout my body. And so that actually brought me to a point of paralysis where the signals could not get from my brain into my muscles to have my body move. And so it was extremely terrifying to have the sense that you're losing complete control of your body. And it came on progressively over a couple of weeks. And then I started to drop glasses because I just wasn't able to hold on. And the weakness was just getting more and more profound. And until one day I could not stand up on my own. And I knew it was time to go to the hospital. And so when I got there, I was actually having trouble chewing and speaking by that point. And so I was diagnosed with Guillain-Barré syndrome. GBS is much easier to say. We'll just go ahead and give it an acronym. But
I like trying to speak French, but yeah, I think GBS works a lot better.
Yes. And, Chris, I'm just going to get pretty raw about this because I know how candid you are with your listeners. And that's the one reason why they follow you, because, they crave that realness. And I'll tell you that first morning when I was in the hospital and I was barely able to move, I was able to very slowly take myself out of the bed with the assistance of a walker. And I was literally moving at a snail's pace, and I'm trying to get to the bathroom. I'm wearing non-skid socks on a walker with a dribble of pee running into my sock. And I'm standing there and saying, who is this person? What happened to me? And I felt like I had been transported into the body of a 90-year-old woman overnight. And it was just unrecognizable and very difficult to come to terms with this recovery that my doctors were going to, saying could take up to 3 years.
So they knew what the situation was, because if they were giving you a prognosis, that means they knew they had done a diagnosis, correct?
They did. Now, they were not too confident in it, I'll say that. So they thought that's what was going on. And then even later, I was experiencing tons of frequent infections, over a month of fevers and unexplained things, and different very invasive tests and other things. So they weren't quite sure, because my case wasn't textbook necessarily, but that's what they had, enough to go on and enough to share with me what was ahead in terms of my journey.
So they had an idea, but just not enough to go with. What was your family going through psychologically and emotionally while you were dealing with this? Because from my own experience, I know no information or very little information is not good information when you're a family member caring for someone in the hospital.
It is so true. And so I think what also added another layer to this is that I was hospitalized at the beginning of the pandemic. And so I was not allowed to have any visitors whatsoever or anybody there with me. And I think that,
yeah,
it was so hard then, not only for me, but then for my family, and especially my husband, Jeff, who wanted to show his support, wanted to be there firsthand to hear what the doctors were saying. And just the fear that goes along with, again, losing control of your body and not being able to reach over and pick up a fork to eat, by yourself. And so that required a lot of work on our part. And I think I even found myself trying to reassure him, I tried to, talk to him a little bit when I felt up to it, and when somebody could hand me the phone and be able to speak to him for a moment. And the other thing that I just tried to tell myself is that you're by yourself, but you're not alone. And I think that's such an important distinction. And I just mentioned that in case there's somebody listening who themselves or has a loved one going through a hospitalization during this time, because it's a whole different animal to be separated, and also to be going through the uncertainty of that diagnosis.
Wow, that is so profound that you're able to have that realization while you're in that situation. I don't mean to rhyme, but that happens from time to time. So you're in this medical condition, GBS, your body is not working, your family cannot see you. At what point, well, first of all, what prompted you to have that thought of, just because I'm alone, just because I'm by myself does not mean I'm alone? And was that the turning point for you mentally to start making the upward climb?
I think it was. And there, as I'm sure you can relate so much to, Chris, in terms of your own personal journey, is that there are situations that you just cannot control, and you can only control so much about what's happening to you at a given time. But no matter what is happening to you physically, nobody can take away your choice of how you choose to see, how you choose to interpret and internalize your situation. And so, even though I wasn't able to move my body, nobody could take away how I chose to see it. And I recognize that it was a choice. And I'm not saying it was easy. There were lots of breakdowns, and bad days and really tough days, but it felt empowering to me in that moment when I can control so little that no one can take that away.
I think I was thinking of Viktor Frankl and that, and his whole message. And I think it's man's search for meaning, correct?
Yes, it is.
And, his whole message about hope. And that is definitely something to not underestimate, because once, if you have hope, anything is possible, no matter the situation. So you start developing this mindset. At what point were things starting to follow your mindset and go up that upward trajectory towards recovery?
Yeah. So when I left the hospital, I was not able to go up one stair, let alone the 17 stairs that lead from my downstairs to my bedroom, where I have a full bath up there. And so, and thankfully, my mom lives locally. I was able to go and rehab with her in a 1-story home. And so I did something that I think that you do so often too, Chris, is I use some humor, because that's just how I am. And it's how I like to relate to others. And so there was also this need for my recovery to separate myself of how I see myself, and this 90-year-old version of me that now was my reality. So I said, now I have an alter ego, and I named her Mildred. And Mildred was this, puttery 90-year-old lady who watched the birds and needed a potty chair and needed help doing everything. And, during that time, and needed to be bathed and all those sorts of things. And I just tried to tell myself that I'm not a sick person. I'm a healthy person going through an illness. And that helped me to not to internalize and adopt that belief about myself, and take on that identity of permanently being a sick person. That's not how I wanted to see myself. And so the humor helped, and it was a way for me to share on Facebook or on social media, because during the lockdown, I couldn't see anybody, and I was so susceptible to infection that I really wouldn't have been able to anyway. And so I was looking for a way to connect, aside from physical visits, and that helped me through. And so I think the other thing was, the humor could have been a little bit of it was a coping mechanism for sure.
Oh, yeah.
But a couple of days out of the hospital, this was also a turning point for me, is that a friend shared on Facebook, she shared a website for Project Athena. Never heard of it before. So it's an organization, a nonprofit, who helps survivors live their adventurous dreams. And so the founder is Robin Benincasa, and she is a world adventure racing champion. And
Okay.
she and the foundation provide grants for people who've overcome a major medical setback to live out an adventurous journey together with other survivors and supporters. And so I read that there was this trip to Zion National Park, and that it was an ultra marathon hike. And at that point, a goal to me would have been, let's sit up for 5 minutes, or let's stand for 5 seconds or something. And so that goal, although that was my reality, it didn't motivate me. And so I knew I needed to choose something bigger than myself, and also find a way to wrap gratitude around that goal. And so I decided, when I could not sit or stand, that I was going to hike this ultra marathon hike and I'm no athlete, by the way. So this was, but it was something that began to drive me and gave me a fire.
As a runner, I applaud you, first of all, for picking an ultra marathon. But as a regular person, I think, wow, you must have just been greatly inspired, or there must have been a fire lit underneath you about this Project Athena. And you're the first person who ever told me about this, so I'm highly interested in it now. So how many people do they have participating in these events?
Yeah, so it differs by the different events, and there are several to choose from. So there's a kind of an urban marathon walk that's out in San Diego, either 1 or 2 days. And then there's a Keys to Recovery adventure, which is cycle and paddle over the course of 3 days down in the Florida Keys. Zion is the second most physically challenging. That's the ultra marathon hike. And then also there is a rim to rim hike through the Grand Canyon, which is the most physically demanding option. And you can do 1 or 2 days of that as well. And so in my group, we had, I believe there were 9 of us total on the adventure. And then in some of the adventures, they have a larger group. It just depends. Through the pandemic, it's been probably a little off on the numbers because of travel concerns and things like that. But they're the most amazing humans. And although they come from backgrounds of different diagnoses, it's really about that shared mindset of positivity and hope. And as soon as I read that, I got a chill through me, and I knew that I wanted to share that experience with people who understood how monumental it was going to be. And it would give me a community that I could focus around that was going to provide that positivity that I was looking for, even though it was kind of a ridiculous goal for me to set for somebody who sleeps through their workouts and literally fake sick during second grade PE until the principal called my mom.
Wow. Yeah, that's a bit of a change. You need to do some work to do an ultra marathon. So how long did it take you to train?
So at that point, I just didn't know how I was going to do it. I just knew that that's what I wanted. And so I was trying to take it step by step. And then unfortunately, I relapsed about 5 months after my initial setback. And I was hospitalized again, lost the ability to walk after I had been learning how to walk for 5 months. And it was a devastating setback. And I wondered at that point if I would ever, make it to Zion. But I had submitted my application, even though there was no physical evidence that I was going to be able to actually accomplish it. And so I kept believing that somehow that was going to happen. And so by the time last May rolled around of 2021, I was physically able to at least start walking on my own independently. And Project Athena does provide virtual coaching for 5 months. So we had a very strict training plan that we kept to, and we had milestones to make sure that you could get there. And so some weeks were up to 20 hours a week. It was very intense. But and through the Georgia heat, it definitely prepared me to get to Zion.
So the day arrives. I'm guessing there is a start line. There's a line you got to toe, and the 9 of you are lined up against it. I'm guessing the start was a little anticlimactic. Go, walk. But
right.
What were you feeling as you crossed that starting line and you started on this journey?
I really felt a sense of connectedness and community with the group, because in a traditional race, you might be competing with the others that are in your group. And this was actually the opposite. It was everybody staying together, and we all got a bracelet that said whatever it takes. And so it was about doing whatever it takes so that everyone could cross together. And so it wasn't necessarily about the speed. It was that everybody was going to finish together. And we started at 3:45 in the morning. So it was pitch black, and we were out there with our headlamps and out in the wilderness and seeing a part of the country and a part of the back country in Zion that few people are able to see. And the most profound thing, I think, at the starting line was that I had this laminated card on my backpack, and I had made myself a promise back when I was in the hospital and I couldn't write, that I was going to dedicate every mile to somebody who had uplifted me on my journey. And so prior to leaving, I made 45 very emotional phone calls. I wrote letters. I sent voice messages. And so I had a picture of my family, and I had every single one of those names, and I was going to make it bigger than myself, and I was going to make it about them. And they were really on my mind when we started.
That's quite beautiful, because it's, and I talked about this before during my message. It's important to recognize those who have helped you and to let them know how they have helped you. And so I applaud you for doing that. I'm guessing then you said 45. Is that how many miles the race was?
Yes. And so it was about 23 miles the first day, and then the remainder on the second. And we stayed in a sort of a glamping type of a setup in between, and not a whole lot of sleep. And we started the next day. We got up about 1:30 in the morning to get started the next day, and again began for hours in the dark to make some miles before the heat begins to set in.
I imagine that the night sky must have been just gorgeous with the stars, and very little light pollution.
It was incredible. And there wasn't any of that light pollution, and the silence, even just being able to trek out there and not see another human. I think we were maybe 9 to 10 hours into day one before we even saw anyone else on the trail.
Wow.
And you feel like you have this splendor of nature that's there just for you in that moment. And it was very profound, because I had always tried to use visualization about what it was going to feel like and what it was going to be like when I was on the trail. And some of that wasn't how I wished it to be, because I was in such pain on day 2. And I honestly wondered if I was going to be able to make it. And I knew the only way out was either by foot, or it was going to be a life flight helicopter. And so I made up my mind that I was going to come out on my own 2 feet, but it was not without pain and just uncontrollable crying, just out of sheer exhaustion. It was just something, I've never pushed my body that hard.
But you had your friends with you.
Yes.
And that must have helped you out, obviously, because you're going to tell me that you crossed, I hope.
Yes. And we were at this moment where we were descending this incredibly steep canyon, and it was sort of this donkey path. And then on the right side was a sheer 400-foot drop. And the grade was incredibly steep. And so we were using our poles so that we don't fall forward. And by this time your legs are weak and screaming, So, and I just, after all the pain and then looking at this, and I'm like, okay, nobody told us about this during training, because nobody would show up if we knew about this. And so, but my friends were so smart, and they started asking me about my list. They could see it on my backpack. And so we started going name by name and asking me why that person was on the list. And it was amazing how shifting that in my mind made me feel physically different and physically stronger. And that was really the turning point on the second day, when I knew I was going to make it.
I can very much resonate with that, because I remember when I was early in my recovery, I was still in the hospital, I was still bedridden, that my wife Becky told me about all the people who had helped us while I was in a coma. And that thought of, all these people are stepping up for us. I'm not going to give in to the negativity, because that would be a slap in the face to anyone who stepped up for us. And I imagine that was the same for you, hearing all those names and thinking about how all those people are cheering for you and helping you out. So that is a very deft move by your companions. I can imagine that just was the boost that you needed.
I don't know how they knew to do that, but it was so brilliant. I was much too broken down at that moment to even think of such an idea, whatsoever. So they stepped up big and, really helped me it was a wonderful distraction, and it just took the focus off of myself. And that's exactly what I needed.
Sometimes we do need to take the focus off ourselves and think about others, because if we were to just mire, or just, dwell and wallow in our own mire, we would never find a way out. But, those friends, they throw us that lifeline of whatever form it takes, and it really pulls us through. So,
Absolutely.
I could tell that this journey has greatly impacted you, and you are a changed person because of it. Going after the race, how how had your life changed?
It's funny because I expected to come home and then just sort of celebrate the achievement and then maybe move on with whatever goal that I might want to set next. And I had left corporate. I actually lost my job of 20 years before I was fully recovered, and was the primary breadwinner in the family. And quite a shock, which is another life change that was happening during all of this post 40 drama that you and I decided we would create.
Yes.
And so, but when I got back, I had a sense of uneasiness, this sense of internal tension. And honestly, I felt it for a few weeks. And these feelings kept coming up that I meant to help others. How did you go through all of this? And why did you go through all of this? And it is clearly to serve other people. And it was a very inconvenient nudge because I'd spent time, money, effort building a different business. And I honestly felt very strongly called to pivot and to do something new. And I had this thought come to me, and it was to be a comeback coach. And
Hmm.
although I'd never heard that term before, I immediately felt that that's what I was and was meant to be. And so I, at first, of course, as we all do when we try something new, I felt some fear around it. But okay, Kelly, well, you want to be a coach, be a coach. So I sought out an initial client to work with within a week and a half, and just started being a coach and stepping into that role to just get through that initial fear. And so now I am on a mission to really educate and inspire women in particular to create a life of joy and purpose after they've had a major medical setback.
What are your goals, either short term or long term? Because this is a beautiful endeavor, and I applaud you for taking it on, even though you started out not knowing how to do it. That's sometimes the best way to do something, because then you're, if you don't know what to do, how to do something, well, good chance you might not mess it up because you don't know what the wrong way is. And so what's on track for you now?
Yeah. So right now I'm working with clients one-on-one to just meet them exactly where they are on their journey. And then in April, I'm going to be launching a group program just to create what I felt was lacking, because I think when we receive a very shocking and a devastating diagnosis, I think the first thing we do is strive to connect with people who may have the same problem or the same diagnosis. And the support groups and the online groups that I was joining, I just have to be honest with you, Chris, I was not uplifted and inspired. I was freaking depressed. And so what I want to strive to create is this community that may not have the same diagnosis, but they are absolutely on a journey to reinvent themselves and to refuse to be defined by their illness. And so much of us find strength, especially the big-hearted listeners that you have. We find strength in lifting up other people. And so as part of this group, it's not only they're going to learn and receive coaching, but they are going to want to uplift and support the others in the group. And that's where I see the magic happening. And it's called the Comeback Collective. And I just think there's no limit to what we can create and the community that we can foster.
So by the time this airs, the Comeback Collective will hopefully be going strong. Do you have an ultimate goal for it? Or do you just want to see, well, we're going to start us off and see where it goes?
Yes, I really want to make this accessible to the most people that I can. And so having these types of conversations, and I am going to some public speaking, some elite training in March so that I can begin connecting and sharing from stage. And I have a book kind of, swirling around, and, really it's about, creating these different avenues to bring women into the collective. And some of it is, free, right? I want everybody to benefit from that, even if they don't end up joining the group. And then to have this, more, higher tier model where they're really going to get the finest in, coaching and support as they decide who they are going to be, and not trying to become who they used to be, but boldly go forward from the point at which they are now.
Yes, it's very important to remember that when you deal with a life changing situation, you're no longer that person. I mean, physically, you might look the same, but mentally, spiritually, you might be vastly different. And so trying to live the way you used to be may not work for you now.
Yes.
So that's incredibly important to remember. So where can people reach out to you? I know they could jump on the Comeback Collective, but where else can people say, hey, Kelly, I want some coaching?
Yeah. So the best way to find me is on Instagram at Your Comeback Coach. And when you get out there, you'll see in my bio, there's a few different links. So I'm so excited to offer different recordings of workshops, other valuable content that you can access from there. And I'm just so excited about what's to come and what will already be created by the time that that you're listening here.
So just to give you a heads up, folks, that information might change. If it does change, we'll put it in the show notes. But right now, it's Your Comeback Coach on Instagram and the Comeback Collective on Facebook. Kelly, I'm a gratitude guy, and I find gratitude anywhere I look. What is something on your journey that you are grateful for that maybe in a past life you would never conceive even thinking of as a positive thing?
Mm. That's such a great question. I think there are so many things. That's probably why I'm hesitating to try to answer. But I think that I am grateful for the illness in general for many reasons. I choose to be grateful for it. And one reason is that I lived my life holding too tightly to the steering wheel and trying to think that joy in my life was directly related to control over it and my own planning and ability to know what was around the corner. And it was an exercise in me surrendering a little bit and accepting, and then being able to move through the experiences and choose to interpret what I would out of them. And but that exercise in surrender and of asking for help, and that's actually a really beautiful thing because it allowed me to expand my life and involve other people. And I don't think that I would have necessarily learned that lesson any other way.
I applaud you for that answer because so many of us are, even before we reach our turning point, I guess you would say, are so fixed on keeping everything as just as they like it. This is how I planned it. And then someone says, we're going to take and twist it a bit and change it and then throw out the window and grab something new. Here you go. And so being able to see the beauty and the gift that change is a wonderful thing. So Kelly, thanks so much for sharing that and for that answer. And now for my final question, what is your favorite dinosaur?
Well, I am a Brontosaurus fan, and I just love the gentle giants. There's just something pretty endearing to me about that. And the other thing that I love is that they see the world from a different vantage point that so many of the other creatures walking around on the ground can't see.
I've never had anyone say something about the viewpoint. I know that, there are some people who endear themselves to the gentle giants, and that's certainly admirable, but the different vantage point is something that we all could benefit from. Seeing something from a different point of view could really help us reframe our own stories.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I feel the same way, Chris. I'm so grateful to have spent this time with you.
And same here, Kelly. I really appreciate your time and getting to know you. And I look forward to keeping in touch with you and your story. as you start the Comeback Collective. So thank you so much for being here.
Thank you, Chris.
And so, folks, you can reach out to Kelly at the Comeback Collective on Facebook or Your Comeback Coach on Instagram. If those change, I'll let you know in the show notes. You can reach out to me at chrisdtgordon.com if you're looking for more gratitude, positivity, and resilience. You can download a free tag one sheet. You can go to the merch store and get a tag shirt or hat, or even a what is your favorite dinosaur shirt. There are brontosauruses on the shirt, Kelly, just so you know. And just let's start a conversation about how we can increase your gratitude or the gratitude of young people that you know, so they can become the leaders that we all need them to be. With that, folks, I'm going to ask you to please like, subscribe, share this podcast and these videos and recordings so people can benefit from Kelly's wonderful story and message, others' wonderful stories and messages, because if they're not heard, they can't impact. So please help me out, share and subscribe and all that good stuff. And with that, I ask you to please have a great day. Thank you for making my day better. And remember to pass on perfection and go for greatness.